This week's blog post is on a visit to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. It's the fifth and final part. I've posted earlier on my 5 favorites from the Gardner Museum, but those were chosen from artworks that I found on the net. In August 2020, I visited the Gardner for the first time in decades. The introduction to this series and the following ones are on my website. Just search Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in the tag cloud. In this post, the photos are before my comments. Isabella, who insisted on not putting labels on the works in her collection, would probably approve. These 2 works are in the Titian room. On the left, in this one, Isabella's love of Italian art intersects with her love of textiles. She's used an Italian frame that dates to around 1500 to display a piece of elaborate velvet that was woven a century or so later, around 1625 to 1650, in Italy or Spain. Originally, this frame probably held a devotional painting such as Botticelli's Madonna and Child, which we'll see later in this post. Let's look at the work on the right side. For many centuries, Christ was shown on the road to Calvary, surrounded by spectators. There's a link in the blog post to such a work. But in the early 16th century, Giovanni Bellini pioneered a new type of devotional image, much more narrowly focused and intense. This painting of around 1505 to 1510 is a copy of one of Bellini's works by one of his students or followers, and it shows Christ on the road to Calvary, but it shows only his face and a small part of the cross. This was Isabella's favorite painting. She often placed a vase of violets in front of it, and the museum staff has carried on that tradition, as you can see here. On the left is a portrait by Giovanni Battista Moroni, dated to 1576. The sitter is unknown. Moroni, like Bronzino, did Mannerist portraits that showed sitters as elegant and aloof. In the center is a silver chalice. When Isabella bought it, it was attributed to the Florentine artist Benvenuto Cellini, who lived from 1500 to 1571. This is, in fact, a much later chalice than in the 19th century, but even if it's not by Cellini, it's fascinating to look at. At the upper right, a reminder that the Gardner is unusual among American museums in that its fittings are all worth looking at: the lighting fixtures, the walls, the windows, the ceilings. I haven't found an attribution for this sconce on the Gardner site, so I think it was probably custom-made for the museum. It's difficult to see how a wrought iron sconce that was centuries old could be adapted for electricity so that none of the wires showed. Moving on to the long gallery. 2 works by Sandro Botticelli. His Virgin and Child with an Angel dates to 1470 to 74. It's a lovely example of the suite style, which we've seen in several other works at the Gardner. The style arguably reached its peak in Madonna and Child paintings by Botticelli, such as this one. Botticelli did many such paintings early in his career. Look at the exquisite way that the Madonna's face is shaped and shaded, and how delicately transparent her veil is. This is one of my favorite paintings at the Gardner. The painting on the right is Botticelli's Nativity from the early 1480s. I don't like this one as much as Botticelli's Madonna and Child on the left, but it's an interesting composition, and I appreciate it because I know it takes considerable skill to fill the space of a circular painting in a satisfying way. On the left, an Italian sculpture, painted terracotta, I think, dates to around 1480. These 2 amuse me because it looks like a mutual admiration society. And I don't know any mother and child who have that sort of relationship. On the right side is a work by a much later imitator of Antonio Rossellino. Rossellino, who lived in the 1400s, worked in the suite style, like Botticelli. The Gardner site doesn't state whether Isabella bought this relief believing that it was Rossellino's work rather than a 19th century imitation. Of course, there's nothing wrong with buying an imitation if you know that that's what you're buying and you like it. Selling a forgery as an original work is a very different matter. On DianeDurantewriter.com there's an essay about forgeries and fakes, if you're interested in that sort of thing. Next up, Isabella, who was a devout Anglo-Catholic, installed a chapel in her palazzo. The centerpiece of it is a Gothic stained glass window from the Cathedral of Soissons. Every year on Isabella's birthday, April 14th, a memorial service is held in the chapel for her. And for something completely different, this is an Asian screen from the third-floor passage where Isabella exhibited part of her collection of Japanese and Chinese screens and doors. Last stop is the Gothic room on the third floor. There's an overview of it at the left. The most important piece in it is Giotto's Presentation in the Temple, which dates to around 1320. Few of Giotto's paintings are in the United States. This small one, which is about 17 by 17, is from a series of 7 paintings on Christ's life that are scattered in museums in America and Europe. One of Giotto's innovations was the use of dramatic pose and gesture, as seen in his Lamentation and the Kiss of Judas, which you can look up on the net. In the Gardner's painting, that use of pose and gesture is illustrated on a smaller scale in the way the Christ child reaches toward his mother. In most paintings of the Presentation in the Temple, the Christ child is just a well-behaved little bundle. See Innovators in Painting on Giotto and his innovations. Closing out this series on the Gardner is a portrait of Isabella by John Singer Sargent, completed in 1888. Isabella later said she rejected 8 versions of her face before she was satisfied. The painting, in a room with Gothic painting and fragments of Gothic architecture, has its own religious overtones. The design behind Isabella's head is strongly reminiscent of a halo. On the other hand, the décolleté of her dress apparently caused a ruckus, as had Sargent's 1884 depiction of Madame X. Isabella's husband asked her not to put the work on display while he was still alive. The Gothic room was not open to the public until after Isabella's own death. In the photo on the left, you can see this painting over there in the corner. On the left is the rose window from the Gothic room, and on the right is something which I think is a pulley. It's just an amazing piece of wrought iron, and I thought it deserved to be shared. DianeDurantewriter.com has hundreds of posts on sculpture, painting, and my many other obsessions. To join the free Sunday Recommendations email list, visit the URL that's on the screen or email me. And you can say, "Well done, Diane," or support my work and receive rewards by means of the tip jar on DianeDurantewriter.com. Thanks as always for listening.